I would like to first, of course, thank Ambassador Wilcox for hosting this event and Americans for Peace Now with us at Project Engage. And I'd like to take just a few minutes to let you know a little bit more about the Kairos Project and Project Engage, because we are two new initiatives here in Washington, D.C. that I'm sure none of you have heard about because we just launched our website just a couple days ago. And these are some of our first events here. Kairos Project, it represents a long journey for me personally, and I know Danny as well. Danny's also a senior advisor with the Kairos Project. And our mission is a little unusual, but I think it's timely given the discussion today about Jerusalem. Our mission is to educate America's faith-based communities, mainstream faith-based communities, about the causes of and hopefully solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For most people around the world, they view the conflict through the prism of their faith in the Holy Land, and unfortunately, many religious actors have played a quite negative role in writing that conflict historically. And fortunately, however, there's a broad set of people around the world in the middle who aren't stridently one-sided, either anti-Palestinian or anti-Israeli, but who care fundamentally about human rights and social justice and a common set of values, even though they sometimes find different political expression for those values. And I know Danny and I, in our work on the ground in years, came to know many of these communities and their leaders, and we found great potential there. And the potential, again, is Jerusalem is viewed as a holy city by the three monotheistic religions. And for many years, we've sort of ceded the language that relates to values and fundamental human rights and social justice in favor of a more sort of pragmatic political language. Now, I don't mean to diminish the role of politics, because this conflict is not a theological conflict, it's a political problem. But I'm trying to say that there are ways to engage new voices who can be helpful rather than harmful. And I did want to say also that we have, in that vein, another initiative that's legally part of Kairos called Project Engage. And Rich, Rich is back in the orange tie there. That's Rich Straczynski there. This project does not deal with faith-based communities. Rather, it deals with those core values I was talking about: social justice, human rights, bringing perspectives. Everyday Israelis, everyday Palestinians. We're trying to create a space that's meaningfully pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, pro-American, pro-peace, things we believe are consonant. Rich is the director of that project, and that project is sponsoring this event today. So I ask all of you to make note of him and be in touch, because you'll be seeing a lot of him in the weeks, months, and hopefully years ahead. Now, I'm happy to answer questions about Kairos, but today we're here to talk about Jerusalem. And there's two things that I'd really like to talk about. One that you may not see an obvious connection to, but I think it has to be said, and it absolutely relates to both the future disposition of Jerusalem and to its potential for being not an exemplar of intractable conflict, but a paradigm of coexistence, which it can be and which it has been for many hundreds of years throughout history, if we have a fair reading of history. And that issue is not Jerusalem, rather it's Gaza. Gaza is in the throes of an extreme humanitarian crisis right now. And I just wanted to put that into perspective in terms of Gaza and then relate to Jerusalem. I don't know if you know, but, well, I'm sure everyone in this room does know, but Gaza is, one of the oldest inhabited communities in the world. It was a bastion of intellectualism for hundreds of years when Europe was not a bastion of intellectualism. And that status as sort of a relatively cosmopolitan place lasted for quite some time, and even into the 19th century. But I just wanted to give you a few facts about Gaza 10 years ago, Gaza today, Gaza 10 years from now, and put things in perspective. 10 years ago, Gaza had a literacy rate comparable to that of many Western nations. Today, since the closure of Gaza began a few years ago and was tightened, about 40% failure in Arabic in Gaza's schools, 6th grade, consistent over the last 3 years. 90% failure rates in mathematics. You know the humanitarian figures. You know that Gaza's pretty much closed to the world. It wasn't until Senator Kerry visited last year that things such as sanitary napkins, pasta, diapers were let in to the Gaza Strip. Very basic needs. And what you have, if you look 10 years out, is a burgeoning population of children. It's already over 50% children. 10 years from now, there'll be somewhere between 700,000, 900,000 more children in Gaza. 70% of the population under age 18. They will have been reared in this virtual prison without access to nutrition, clean water, or anything other than a very extremist ideology about the world that they will have never connected to in their entire lives because they will have never left. Now, I personally approach that from sort of a humanitarian human rights perspective. I think that situation is intolerable. But if we frame this in relation to the larger political perspective, which is, I think, why many of us are here today and the issues concerning Jerusalem, I think this helps us to understand what's at stake here. Because first, those kids aren't going anywhere. Israel doesn't want responsibility for them. I guarantee you 10 years from now, if the West Bank turns into Switzerland, they're not going to want responsibility over 2.5 million sick, starving children, Lord of the Flies situation. We won't be able to pay Egypt to take responsibility of this growing humanitarian situation. This situation is deteriorating so rapidly into a situation that is truly politically intractable and intractable from a humanitarian crisis. But aside from the security concerns there, which I think are obvious, think of it in terms of a two-state solution. Who will these children think they are? Will they define themselves as Palestinian? Will we be able to find a compromise that works legitimately for both Israelis and for Palestinians? I hope so, but I'm increasingly doubtful, and just thinking that that's 10 years off, just a little bit after Obama's second term if he's reelected, I think that helps us put the issue into perspective. Because if we relate it back to Jerusalem, while the acute crisis in Gaza is what concerns many of us at a humanitarian level, I think we begin to understand that all roads go back to Jerusalem. All roads go back to Jerusalem in the sense that it is either this paradigm of intractable conflict or it is a beacon of stability and coexistence, not happy-go-lucky kumbaya coexistence, but happening to manage, to get on with our lives as individuals and communities. And I just wanted to say that Jerusalem is absolutely essential, whatever the final disposition is, to both Israelis and Palestinians and to all three faith communities around the world. If we're talking about a two-state solution, just as Gaza is integral to that, so too is Jerusalem, and even more so, and let me tell you why. And I'll only go on 3 more minutes because I know you're waiting to hear again from Danny. But today, we didn't bring our maps. I know I used to come on the Hill when I was working on the negotiations with these ridiculous PowerPoint presentations, and Dan, well, they're not ridiculous, okay, yeah. But I mean, I'm sure that most of the people in the room that I know are tired of seeing those maps. But if you'll just use your imagination for 1 second and sort of imagine Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, Israel jutting sort of into the West Bank here, and then the broader West Bank around it. Sort of Jerusalem, East Jerusalem extends around, sort of think of a banana, then East Jerusalem is around it like an orange. A terrible analogy. I'm not thinking very clearly right now, but for those of you who aren't familiar with the maps. Well, directly to the north of Jerusalem is Ramallah. Directly to the south is Bethlehem. This area once incorporated a metropolitan unit. This was an economic unit. Now, I'm going down to strict economics, and forgive me for ignoring all of the faith dimensions and political concerns here, but I want to put this context, just as I hopefully did with Gaza, into real-world concerns. That economic unit, stretching from Ramallah to Bethlehem, which you could drive about 15 years ago in just 25 minutes, accounted for 30 to 40% of all of the activity, economic activity, in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip combined. If we're talking about a two-state solution, not in theoretical terms, but one that is going to guarantee the security of Israel and the economic viability and security of an independent Palestinian state in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, you have to have an economy that can support the people who live there, both in Gaza and the West Bank. And guess what? Also, the expected numbers of refugees who will not likely be returning in mass to Israel, but rather to a future Palestinian state. So if we're thinking of a two-state solution not in theoretical, rhetorical terms, but very real economic terms, which are very much concerned with everyone's security in the region, this is impossible unless both Israel and both Palestinians, both Palestine, a future Palestinian state, have a shared and a real interest in Jerusalem.